depressed, Zane.
All right. On that note, welcome to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my co-host, Connor Rebish. We are here for UFC 224, Nunes versus Pennington, going down in Rio de Janeiro. And I think I've just kind of had a withdrawal. Maybe that's what's going on. I'm trying to figure out what it is that, I'm excited for this card. I'm looking forward to fights. I'm looking forward to watching it live, and I think it'll be fun, and I think most of the fights will be fine. But if you ask me really what it is of what are you excited for on this card?
You're excited but having trouble justifying it. Yeah, it's like last time we had a couple weeks off, we said the same thing. Like, oh man, it's remarkable the difference that just having some weekends where there is no UFC makes in how amped you can allow yourself to get for more UFC.
It's true, yeah. Just a little extra break between fight cards, and you're like, yeah, I need my fix, you know?
That being said, I feel like I've become more cynical or more inured, and I need a bigger hit now to satisfy. I'm too hooked now. So the 3 weeks off has only made I'm just fiending for some fights, and this does not quite scratch the itch.
True.
If you know what I mean. It's as I say all the time, this would probably be okay as a less prestigious type of card. But there's like resentment built into the pay-per-view model at this point where you better show me some amazing fights if you're going to make me pay $60 for it, because I mean, that's the downside of having such a crazy busy schedule. Like, I can see good fights on TV. And pay-per-views now are supposed to be the last refuge of the stacked card, and this isn't that.
Yeah, other than the ability to see a title fight in this, there's nothing that separates this from any other card.
No,
unless you're
not at all.
Still carrying a torch for Machida and Belfort as the kind of stars that are only going to be on pay-per-views anymore.
You should not be.
Which, actually, as I say that, I just realized that both Machida and Belfort probably last fought on TV for free. Yeah. Belfort 212, but before that, Belfort versus Gastelum, and Machida obviously coming off at that Eric Anders fight.
Not even the UFC is booking them as draws, other than the fact that this is in Brazil. I mean, that's the only way in which they're draws. They're local fighters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're headliners usually. It's just
not anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah. Well, like I say, Machida, that fight with Anders was a headliner, but it was also like the weakest headliner ever.
Yes, I remember bitching quite a bit about that card. So,
in fact, Machida has headlined. This will be the first fight card Lyoto Machida has not headlined since UFC 163 against Phil Davis, where he was the co-main.
I'm not complaining. Can you imagine if Lyoto Machida was in a main event in this, especially after that Eric Anders fight?
It's just weird to think, Machida Munhoz, Machida Musasi, Machida Weidman, Machida Dalloway was a headliner.
But it was also 2 years since his most recent fight before the Anders one, so it's actually been longer than it seems since he's been a main event draw, I think.
Yeah, but it's still, it's weird to think that for a half decade, this will be Machida's first time appearing on the undercard of a fight card.
That's why I have no interest or excitement for the fight at all, because it truly represents the horrible, cynical nature of the fight game. That just everything is just a downward spiral.
Okay, so on that note, we're supposed to be building energy. But
on the downward spiral note, let's get into the first fight.
On the downward spiral note, Marcus Perez, James Boknovic.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
I find this one a little difficult to get a read on. Perez is
Ben Rothwell's kickboxing coach just doesn't get you hyped.
Right. Yeah, I am watching the footage, just hearing that phrase. Oh, it wasn't until recently the full-time kickboxing instructor at Rothwell MMA. I'm like, is that good? I really can't tell. Sometimes Ben Rothwell's okay at that stuff.
Yeah,
it never looks like it though.
Watching Boknovic get teed off on by that
Trevin Giles.
Trevin Giles, who's like a raw tools, blank slate fighter, is not good. Like, if you're going to be the kickboxing coach, that's where you want, like, again, somebody who really has a pretty powerful but limited game. That's where you want the technique to really show up.
Technical base, yeah. And that's why it's difficult, right? Because there are things in this fight that feel like they should be distinct advantages for either fighter. Marcus Perez is like experienced against a higher level of competition. He beat an opponent whose record looked exactly like his, which like James Boknovic has never done. He's always been fighting completely middling journeyman or whatever until Trevin Giles. But also like Marcus Perez has a totally aimless game.
Oh yeah.
He's very reactive in almost everything he does, like whether it's a front headlock choke or a wild winging counter combination. A lot of what he does is based on his opponent bringing the fight to him and him like desperately trying to get them off. And despite having a pretty solid ground game, he's not a very effective wrestler. That being said, Boknovic's takedown defense is not good. And it's crazy because he has a massive reach advantage over Perez.
Yeah.
Boknovic's reach is like 81 inches and Perez is like 72 or something like that. It's like a really generous, but I'm not confident that Boknovic can use it. Because like he had a huge reach advantage over Trevin Giles and Giles lit him up in every single facet of that fight. But Perez is not as skillful, just not innately good at MMA as Giles. It really feels like Perez should have an advantage due to like physicality is kind of what it comes down to for me. That Perez is just stronger and more powerful. He can muscle a takedown, and that should be enough to get Boknovic down if he can put him against the fence.
He doesn't look like your CrossFit addicted accountant.
Yeah, basically. Like it could be if Perez is as reactive as he was in the Anders fight and waits on Boknovic at range, then Boknovic could light him up. Boknovic, well, the one thing you can say about that Giles fight, he landed some devastating kicks.
Yeah.
He can be effective if you give him the range he needs. But so long as Perez just gets in his face, which he'll probably be forced to do even if he doesn't want to, he can take him down and probably just be the stronger guy. So I'm going with Perez, but not feeling too confident about it.
Oh, and I shouldn't have despaired CrossFit like that. He's much more of like the ultra marathon addicted accountant.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. But yeah, I have to pick Perez just kind of offhand, mostly based on physicality.
Yeah.
And power. Maybe to his discredit, Perez is probably not like. It'll be interesting if Boknovic can get an advantage just because Perez doesn't like to box at all, and will probably try to stay way out at kicking range when he's not rushing into the clinch, where Boknovic's reach could be incredibly useful. But Perez is also a very willing wrestler and not a bad one. He's not a great wrestler, but he's got, that basic. He's good on the Brazilian MMA circuit, which usually means he'll get in on a double, pick you up, and slam you down, which is about what what's his name had for Boknovic.
Giles.
It's about what Giles had.
Yeah, that he got. Who was Perez's last fight? It was
Eric Anders.
Yeah, that he got. His takedowns were stuffed by Anders is not like a great sign because Anders is mostly just athletic talent.
Yeah,
and will react really late on a takedown and still manage to stuff it. But it was clear at least that Perez had an idea for what positions he was working for to get takedowns and had a few different options of getting the fight to the ground.
Yeah, and I mean, if the on the other side, it's like, well, so he couldn't get the really great athlete down. So what about the really bad athlete?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I just trust Perez enough to be able to get this fight to the ground, and Boknovic doesn't look good enough on defense that if Perez rushes him, he didn't seem to have any answers for Giles just coming after him, which Perez seems mildly willing to do. Just like push the clinch, push for takedowns, push your way inside. Like I say, my big hesitation is Perez's unwillingness to really throw hands if it's not a spinning strike. Like, he'll throw a spinning back fist all day, but a jab, God, no.
My
But
favorite thing about MMA.
An overhand right, nope, back fists all day.
Mm-hmm. But we should say Bogdanovic does have quite a few submission wins on his record, but he's not like you could see in the Giles fight. He's I guess the good way to put it is to borrow some BJJ scout terminology. He's aggressive, but he doesn't have a trapping style of guard in any way. He's got exactly the kind of submission game that'll only work against like a weaker opponent.
Yeah, I mean, in the Giles fight, he was going for a straight arm bar from his guard.
Right, with just wrist control.
Just wrist control. And then when Giles stood up, he had his feet crossed behind Giles' back, like holding him in this bridged out closed guard, which is just like, they seemed like moves that were from somebody not comfortable being on their back, but willing to try stuff, which is exactly the kind of thing that tends to get guys submitted and outworked and horribly beat up.
That he wasn't like patient enough to not go for things.
Yeah.
But wasn't controlled enough to go for things effectively.
Yeah. So that also gives me a lot more feeling of Perez being able, if he gets this to the ground, because he is actually a good grappler on the ground, a good back taker, a good positional submission hunter. But it's just the lack of striking structure in there that makes that less remarkable. Anyway,
I know it's middleweight, but even I'm bored of this matchup now. Let's move
on. Bogdanovic is a opened as plus 170 underdog, has trended upward pretty consistently since opening, is now plus 244. And Perez opened at minus 200 and is continually trended down, is minus 304. That's absurdly high on Marcus Perez, but
it's absurdly high. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah,
Marcus Perez does not deserve that kind of weight, even over James Bogdanovic. Like I said, he's totally aimless.
Yeah, he just throws lots of kicks out at range, and then will throw random spinning strikes, and then just run into the clinch. Yeah, there were moments where he turned his back and ran from Eric Anders in their fight.
Yeah. He did not like that pressure. Yeah, there's a very good chance, like there's a substantial chance that Bogdanovic can actually win this fight on the feet if Perez gives him the right kind of fight. So
if Perez just sits outside and is like, well, I'll try to leg kick him and throw spinning strikes without any setup, he could easily get head kicked.
Mm-hmm.
That brings us to a welterweight bout: Alberto Mina, Ramazan Emeev. And I want to like this fight because I want Alberto Mina to win, and Alberto Mina is secretly a pretty good fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's just kind of a dude that nobody's heard of or paid attention to because he fights once every year and a half, and it doesn't even sound like he knows why. Like, he had in the last 6 months, he's just like, people started talking like, oh, what's going on with you and your career? It's like, I don't know. They're not giving me fights. Like, nobody's offering me, the UFC's not offering me any fights, so I'm not fighting. I have no idea why.
Yeah, it's been almost 2 years since his last fight.
And, for a dude that has 2 exciting knockouts and then a win over Yoshihiro Akiyama on his record in the UFC, you'd think they would be a little more interested in getting him back in there more quickly. But
yeah. I mean, I usually automatically side with the fighters over the UFC, but Mina's whole career has also kind of been like this?
It has.
He fought a lot in the first 2 years, and then it's
only fought once every year. For a dude who's been fighting since 2005, 13 years, he has 13 fights.
Right.
So, yeah, there could just be there could be a regular breakdown in communication and his own desire to not fight very often playing as well into the UFC, just being like, well, if you don't want to fight, we'll just whatever, we'll have you under contract, and no big deal. But Mina he's got a good fun pressure game as a lead fighter, somebody as the guy always willing to throw the first strike. he's good about staying on his front foot to do it. And he mixes in a lot of really good power hooks and long punches with a variety of hard kicks and, exciting strikes. It's sort of, for a dude who doesn't use a jab a lot, it seems like an actually pretty functional pressure game. He stays way outside, jumps in with hard shots, but with enough variety to kind of change things up.
I don't know if he still is, but at least at one point he was a Cordero fighter, I believe.
Was he? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think he spends a lot of time out in Japan training people there, or in Asia rather. I don't know if Japan, but training, like being an instructor, I think in smaller gyms over there.
Yeah.
And then he's also, he's a 3rd-degree black belt. We haven't seen a lot of his submission work in the UFC or any of it really, but he's definitely an aggressive grappler at times. I think that's going to be the problem though here. The combination of being a fighter highly reliant on pressure and a very willing grappler. Like you look at the submissions Mina's picked up over his career, and they're, he's got a couple rear naked chokes, but he's also got a few arm bars too, which highly suggests to me a fighter willing to get put on his back and then go for things. And if you look at like his fight with like Akiyama, when he's moving backwards, he will just back himself straight into the fence, and then he backed himself to the fence and then went for a reactive takedown, which Akiyama stuffed with an uppercut. And it just seemed like the kind of game built to like, I'm moving forward and I'm dominating the pressure, or I'm kind of lost. And then if we go to the ground, I will just try to pick up whatever I can from whatever position I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And against a fighter like Ramazan Emeev, who's incredibly hard to hurt and to really take out of his game with like a big single exciting strike, Mina throwing a flying knee from 10 feet outside is cool, but it doesn't seem like the kind of thing that's especially likely to knock Emeev out. Otherwise, he's going to have to contend with Emeev, who's just going to want to bull forward, push for the clinch, and push for takedowns. And if he's willing to give up takedowns, I have a little more faith in Ramazan Emeev to work a highly controlled, dominating top game than I do Mina to pick up subs off his back. So I'm going to pick Emeev here.
Yeah, I think all of that's very fair. Thing with like as you said, the dynamic of the fight sort of just implies Emeev is going to get to the clinch a lot.
Especially, also I should note, as a former middleweight moving down against a welterweight who's not particularly huge. Yeah,
that's interesting actually. I'm wondering, but Emeev won his last fight, so it's like it must have been a decision he was either intending to make already, or it's not at least a decision made based on like, oh, I can't hang at middleweight.
Yeah, I think it was I didn't cut that much weight fighting over on the Russian circuit, and now I'm in the UFC. I'm planning on automatically dropping a division.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah. Basically, Emeev is a beast in the clinch, and he's gonna get to clinch a lot because of the way that Mina tends to avoid things. It's weird because there have been flashes of better outfighting from Mina. Like, I think his first UFC fight was the one with Shinjo Anzai.
Yep.
And that was okay. Like he exhausted himself, as did Shinjo Anzai on 10 days notice went fighting like a maniac trying to get after Mina. And Mina didn't throw anything that wasn't a full power counterpunch or flying knee. But he was using angles, he was timing counters and getting out, using the clinch to close distance a couple times when he needed to. There was some craft there. I think like with Mina, you get the kind of wild inconsistency that you really see in fighters who don't fight that often.
Yeah.
Like he's just rusty in different ways every single time he shows up in the cage. And so sometimes he's like against Akiyama is just totally overthinking everything. It can't get off, can't pull the trigger. It's just like, is it going to be this? Is it going to be this? He's reacting way too much. Other times he's like, he can't stop himself from throwing things like against Anzai. So it can be difficult to get a read on him, but really it's a lot of these things come down to he doesn't like being pressured. He becomes really inconsistent and makes these sort of gross strategic errors when the opponent is bringing the fight to him. That's the way MAF likes to fight. It just seems like MAF is going to get his kind of fight, is going to grind on Mina in the clinch, and he really just has to watch out for a flying knee on the way in. But even there, he's safer than some fighters would be because he likes the clinch. He's not like totally dependent on shot takedowns.
Yep.
So MAF feels like I like Mina, and I would love to see him get a win here. I for some reason I also have like a fondness for his game as just an unappreciated, solid fighter. But it feels like a good matchup for MAF.
Yeah. MAF is the favorite, opening at -210 and basically staying flat. He's at -205 right now, so no real movement on that line. Mina likewise opening at +160, currently at +167, which I'm comfortable with enough with that, mostly just because Mina fights so rarely. And I don't really feel like this is a hometown fight for Mina, even though he's Brazilian. Like I say, I think he spends a lot of his time overseas.
He's super inactive, and MAF just won a fight a couple months ago.
Yeah.
So,
all right, that brings us to a middleweight bout: Lyoto versus Jack Hermansson.
interesting matchup here, I think. One of the cheekier ones on the card for the simple reason that is Jack Hermansson a good enough outfighter to give Lyoto those Anderson Silva flashbacks? That's the dynamic of the fight. Is ever since we rewatched Silva Lyoto on the Depressed Us and came to appreciate it in a new light, I have just not been able to watch Lyoto eat a jab without realizing that his eyes are just flashing wild images of Anderson Silva kicking him with the wrong leg and doing basically whatever he wanted because he was too skillful. And it's like Lyoto, that is the kind of fight he dislikes most of all, is somebody picking him apart from long range. It really frustrates him. He gets tired. He gets flinchy. He's just not comfortable in that kind of matchup. And those have been the guys who have been beating him. And Hermansson can play that kind of game.
Yeah, Hermansson's almost his entire striking arsenal only functions when his jab is working.
Yeah. And we have seen him more effective, like as a more aggressive grappler type of fighter in a lot of fights. But when he is striking, that's the kind of game he's pretty good with. One thing that stands to be a pretty, well, actually, let me check. No, okay. Latest is Orthodox fighter, right?
Yeah, he's Orthodox.
Okay, so like, well, yeah, one
Cezar Ferreira, when Hermansson fought Cezar Ferreira, it was something like, oh wait, I can't throw a jab, southpaw, and then he just couldn't strike like whole fight. It was just.
I mean, he should have still been throwing jabs. But,
I know, but that's pretty clearly what was going on.
So, like, Lyoto's big problem is the jab.
Yeah,
and that is the big thing that Hermansson likes to throw. And other than that, this gets kind of spicy as far as the ground entanglements are concerned. Lyoto is probably going to be forced into forcing those engagements. And Hermansson is not shy. Like, he's actually a very solid grappler.
Yeah.
Particularly from top position. Positionally on top, he's got mean ground and pound. He's a good guard passer. Keeps a lot of pressure on, stays nice and low. But, man, I don't know about this one, Zane. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
he's big and strong. I think his wrestling's gotten a little better in recent years, but he's just not going to get the kind of fight that he really wants, I don't think. Like, if Hermansson has learned anything from recent losses, he will have learned that he can just not engage in Lyoto's fight. Just stay at long range and pick him apart, and he would probably win this very comfortably if he does that. I don't really trust Jack all that much, though.
No, I think a couple of things going for me are that I think the longer this fight goes, the much higher percentage there is that Hermansson just runs away with it as it goes down the stretch. B, how much worse an athlete can you be and fight Krzysztof Jotko's fight against Lyoto? You know? where like Jacare gets taken down immediately in that fight and then sweeps Lattis and is like then works takedowns and like out grapples him from top position. Like, how much worse of an athlete can you be and make that happen?
Hermansson's not a terrible athlete. He's
Not
pretty
a
good.
terrible athlete, so he's not. It's not abominably worse.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be a little worse of an athlete and do the same thing?
Yeah, my gut leans towards probably because Talaslitis is inevitably becoming a slightly worse athlete over time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the gas tank thing really does make for a great leveler in terms of athletic ability. That like if you can play the right kind of game against Litis, all that flinching and tensing up, he gets tired. And when he gets tired, you like more and more lately, it seems you can hurt him, even with like glancing kind of blows. He just seems like he's nearing the end to me.
And it's worth noting in the last decade, well, going all the way back to the to 2010, Lattis has one first round finish, and that was his that was his knockout of Trevor Smith when he came back, and suddenly it was like Talis Lattis, sellout boxer now, like
yeah.
And he went on that 5-fight win streak to ensure that he would have a long and fruitful UFC career on his return.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I don't know. Like, yeah, he hasn't submitted anyone in the first round since Jesse Taylor back at MFC 25.
Yeah, his ground game still looks good when you see it, but it's not that dangerous.
Towards fast, like instant, just pick up a sub.
Yeah, so he kind of just tends to like run into roadblock on the ground these days. But I don't know if Hermansson is good enough off his back to. I don't know. The thing is, like Hermansson, he's pretty good on the ground.
Yeah. Since you're waffling, I'm going to say my pick for this is that I honestly just don't think Lattis can freeze Hermansson enough to make this his kind of fight. Like, he can't get a Chris Camozzi performance out of Jack Hermansson where he can just go in, take him down, and just absolutely shut him down for several rounds before getting the submission hooked up. Or, the Tim Boach fight where in that case it's just like, well, you're going to have a banger with Tim Boach. But once you get Tim Boach down, his grappling game just opens up. It's just like, Tim Boach is one of those really early video game bosses where like when you hit just the right spot, suddenly all the parts light up and it's just like, now hit as much as you possibly can. All of these options are available. You just have to get past that one roadblock.
Mm-hmm.
And
when his hips glow red, you take him down.
Exactly. When his hips glow red, you take him down, and then all of him glows red, and you can do as much
damage. Flashing, and you can light him up.
Yeah. Yeah, I just don't see that out of Hermansson. Hermansson, he got knocked out by Thiago Santos, but I almost kind of feel like if that fight had gone another round, he might have been able to turn that around and win it.
Yeah, I did not like at all how poorly he reacted to just the wild flurrying of Santos. But does Lattis even have it in him to throw those wild flurries anymore? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. He's never had it in him to throw them with that much speed.
Does he have it in him to throw them once he starts getting his face jabbed off?
Yeah,
I don't think.
And the Ferreira loss, like I said, I think a lot of that is down to Ferreira being a southpaw and Hermansson just being like, oh, I can't use my normal kickboxing tool, and then just giving away a really terrible fight. So I just don't see. I don't know. Hermansson's been submitted. I mean, Ferreira submitted him. Jason Butcher submitted him in 2013, but
he's grown as his ground game has grown since then.
Leites would have to. I think Leites has to prove that he can pick up the submission over Jack Hermanson, because I don't see him winning on points, and I don't see him just stalling him out.
But if Leites comes out and he's like, I'm just going to throw heat and just like he could actually get the kind of fight he needs doing that as well.
Sure.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's like both guys are just almost really solid fighters. They're almost fighters you can trust.
They're prototypical middleweights where you're like, oh, I really like a part of this guy's game.
Yes.
The rest of it's kind of trash, but that one part, fuck, I love that one part.
I think that's what really sets the like middleweight connoisseur. Pat Wyman and I have talked about, is a fighter actually good or is he perfectly fine? And I think the real thing is that my bar for liking a fighter is if just one part of their game is actually good.
Yeah.
and that makes them perfectly fine. But both of these guys have actually good skills and also skills that are not that great.
Yeah. Hermanson is a favorite, opening at -210, adjusting up and down to about -150, and is currently at -154. No movement on that line after initial adjustments. Latest opening at +160, adjusting up and down to +124, and is currently at +128. I think that's just about right for me, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this should be close to even and leaning a little towards Hermanson.
Agreed.
That brings us to Warlley Alves versus Sultan Aliyev.
Speaking of fighters we haven't seen in forever.
Yeah, Aliyev, visa issues, injury issues, looking like a bad Forrest Griffin clone. He got left in the tank too long.
Looking like a movie terrorist from like Central Casting. Probably makes it really hard to get on flights.
I'm picking Warlley Alves because I want Warlley Alves to win.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a very real chance that Sultan Aliyev wins this fight
I do want to correct what I said. He doesn't look like a terrorist from Central Casting. He looks like the muscle in an Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah, there you go.
The semi-boss. Okay, go on. Sorry.
But Aliyev could win this just by following a sort of cut rate version of the Kamaru Usman game plan. Just like bull forward with power shots, push for the clinch, force Warlley Alves to make the wrong decision, which he will do if you really go after him and pressure him and, take the fight to him. We've seen him in several fights now. Alan Jouban, Brian Barberena, just kind of make the wrong move. And even the Colby Covington fight, he beat Colby Covington, but he also beat him because Colby Covington went for a takedown and he just jumped on a guillotine, where if you don't get that guillotine, you're giving up position. I
mean, he finished him in the first 2 minutes of the fight. And not necessarily left to go on.
There's every chance that he can do the same thing to Sultan Aliyev, because Aliyev will go for the exact same kind of takedowns. And you see, Aliyev's fight with Bojan Veličković. Veličković jumped on a guillotine and tried to lock it up. Veličković's guillotine isn't as good as Alves's, so maybe if Alves gets that same opportunity, he gets that submission. Otherwise, I also really liked what I saw out of Alves against Salim Touari, who he just had a clear, huge advantage over everywhere. And it was good to see Alves with that advantage. It was actually good to see him coast out a fight.
Yes.
And just be like,
we needed to see from Warlley Alves.
Yeah. Just like, oh, I can beat this dude. I'm just going to play it safe and pick my shots, go after takedowns, be a better athlete than him. If the knockout or the submission comes, I'll take it, but I'm not going to go out there and try to force it.
Felt like you could even see him mentally resetting after each strike he would throw. He would kind of do the Dominic Cruz thing, take a breath. Okay, reset. Every single punch he threw was the first punch he threw. He never looked tired, or even when he would get cornered, he was just his eyes looked fantastic in that fight. He was just watching everything Touari was doing.
as long as Alves does that, I think he can beat Sultan Aliyev, who's still just like a fundamental throwback nuts and bolts wrestle boxer.
Mm-hmm.
Throw the overhand right, go in for the takedown, get on top, work position while landing enough strikes so you don't get stood up. And he's actually strong enough and powerful enough that he can knock people out too. Going with those wild entry punches, he's bricked up enough that he can knock people out. But Alves is incredibly durable, absurdly durable, and is just a more dynamic athlete, a better submission artist, and much more technical striker. So.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've seen from Aliyev too, the way he throws himself forward can also lead to him getting knocked out by Kenny Robertson of all people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm picking Alves, but it's very much I want you to fight the right fight. I want to see you win this, because if you lose it, it's most likely just going to be you getting ground against the cage over and over again and unable to make the right decisions at the right time.
Yeah.
So
I'm also going with Alves, and I think it's essentially because I'm giving a fighter who maybe does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, that Tuari fight, we've had enough examples at this point to know that freaking out under some kind of duress and wasting all of your energy and not being able to settle down is a part of Warlley Alves' personality and style as a fighter.
Yeah,
that is something he has struggled with numerous times, but seems specifically to have countered in the Tuari fight. Seemed like a specific answer to those problems. Like he'd really focused on, okay, this time we're just going to get some work in. We're going to stay really cool.
It was a lot like the Nunes-Shevchenko fight.
Yeah, right. Where maybe wasn't like everything you wanted to see for a perfect winning performance, but it was important for him to have that kind of fight. Just like for Nunes, it was a totally different thing for her to fight that kind of fight against Shevchenko. And to me, like Sultan Aliyev's big advantage in this, like his angle in this matchup, is that he's a welterweight who is built exactly like Phil Davis. And like other than that, yeah, he has a real, other than power and size, to help his game. His game, as you said, is really, really bare bones. There's just not a lot of nuance to it. Warlley Alves, like the thing that impressed me most about the Tuari fight, aside from the two things that really impressed me, I guess, throwing punches that weren't full power, like just letting shots fly with ease, but also, as I noted before, how well he was seeing everything coming at him. The thing I really liked is Tuari would corner him, and you can say it's not a great look that Tuari cornered him, but he would get him in the corner and be feinting, and Alves, it was the stuff that Alves didn't react to that I thought that showed how calm and relaxed he was. That Tuari would get there and stand right in front of Alves, and Alves would just wait for him to actually attack, and if he didn't attack within 2 seconds, he would attack first and get himself out of there. He wasn't flinchy, he wasn't anxious, he was just reading what was happening in the fight, and I don't think Sultan Aliyev has enough diversity or trickiness to beat that kind of Warlley Alves. So as long as that does mean some kind of permanent change for Warlley Alves, this should be a fight that he can win. And who knows, like chances of Sultan Aliyev gassing out or having a flinchy bad performance of his own after not being in the cage for a year and a half or something are pretty high as well.
Aliyev is a reasonable underdog, opened at plus 180 and has moved up and down a little over the past few days, but is at plus 189 now. Still not a lot of movement on that line. And Alves opening at minus 260, adjusted up to minus 225, and is currently at minus 235, once again moving up and down a little in the past couple of days to get right back about where it started. I mean, the only big quibble here is that I think Aliyev does have a clear path to victory.
Mm-hmm.
So I like Alves in this fight, but it's sort of you need to show up and fight the right fight, because Aliyev will just show up and fight the kind of fight that could beat you.
Yeah. you know exactly what Aliev's gonna do. It's up to you to do the right thing in response. And Alves has not always been that guy. But
nope.
I'll just read those odds and I see like, okay, the layoff for Aliev is a little bit of a finger on the scale, and that's probably why it feels a little heavy in the direction of Alves.
Fair enough. All right, that brings us to a welterweight bout. Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos versus Sean Strickland. Connor?
We have never figured out how to pronounce his name. I think this is context clues because we not too long ago learned that Matthias Nicolau is Matthews Nicolau.
Matthews Nicolau.
I think it's Elizeu.
Elizeu?
I think that's how you pronounce that little phoneme in Brazilian Portuguese.
Yeah, that could be. It's just the kind of thing I'm never going to try.
I think it's Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos.
Elizeu. Okay. You have to just say it like you're really posh. Elizeu.
Oh, too sick to be posh. Well, let's see. Boy, what a style contrast this matchup is, Zane. Like, we are here against the guy. Sean Strickland is way too controlled.
Way too controlled.
Way too controlled. He just won't let shit go, and that is the big difficulty. Even in fights he's winning, he just doesn't seem to ever win them big enough. He never chases the opportunity. He never turns it into a fight where it's like, okay, you have the momentum. It's always a sparring match. It's always even. And Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos is like barely learning to control himself now. And it's taken a while.
Yeah.
But like, if you go back, I just watched his Omari Akhmedov fight. He's just a maniac. Like, just wild hooks. In fairness,
imagine coming off the Max Griffin fight and being like, that's a more controlled Elizeu Zaleski.
Right, exactly.
Elizeu.
Yeah, exactly. He's just barely harnessing his rage at this point in his career. I will say, like, he seems pretty comfortable in that kind of fight. Even in the Akhmedov fight, he wasn't shutting his eyes and swinging, hopefully, like, with no idea what was happening. He was dodging counters coming back at him. He was still timing these gigantic swings. It's just that every swing is crazy. It's just like full power, wide, sweeping hook. But there is like, he's one of those fighters like a Francisco Ronaldo, where it's like, oh, he's just like muscling everything, and the looseness can deceive you into thinking that there's no craft there. But there's craft. He knows what he's doing. He just has a swanging and banging kind of style. And it's kind of hard to imagine that not working against my boy Sean Strickland.
Yeah.
Like, Sean just doesn't pull a trigger enough. There are going to be a lot of opportunities for him to land his jab at long range. He's going to get that shot in there. There are going to be a lot of opportunities for him, should he take them, to land decisive counters. Dos Santos, even though he is still aware, like, there's a reason technical fighters don't swing like that. You can be hit. There's just no way around it. You're going to be slower to recover and everything. And Strickland is also a really capable wrestler, which is something that Dos Santos has struggled with in numerous fights in the past. So, like, there are plenty of paths here that Sean Strickland could take. The problem with Sean Strickland is that he just doesn't take paths. Everything's a sparring match.
His hallmark as a fighter is fooling opponents into thinking that he's going to do a lot more than he's doing.
Yeah, which he is pretty good at.
Yeah.
Like, he does. If you're not like super confident in your own game, Sean Strickland's accuracy and poise can throw you off.
Well, it's always like the jab and then a feint, and like the jab and a feint. You're always like, oh, but that right hand's going to be coming someday. I better watch out for it. Nope.
And you're like, oh, it's been 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But the thing is Dos Santos has tremendous confidence in his game and knows exactly what he wants to do. And I just don't think that kind of decisive action is going to be good for Sean Strickland. I love him.
Yeah, that's kind of my feeling too, is that like Strickland could get him down, but is he going to chase a lot of takedowns? Is he going to chase the ground game? Probably not that much and not that heavily. And when he opens up, Zaleski's a pretty good scrambler and good at getting back up to his feet and resetting. And then if it comes to who's going to be the busier fighter charging it, like throwing with power, looking to keep things creative. I trust I mean, it's kind of, Zaleski's not as polished as Ponzinibbio is now, but is he as polished as Ponzinibbio was when Ponzinibbio beat Strickland? Basically just doing that like 3 years ago?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Pretty much.
Because that's what it was just Ponzinibbio was willing to stay on Sean Strickland, keep throwing big shots at him, and ignore, and just take it for granted that nothing's coming behind that jab.
And I think by like the typical explosive speed, etc. metrics, you could say Zaleski is a better athlete than Ponzinibbio. Like he's
definitely quicker on his feet. I don't know if he's otherwise overall a better athlete, but
the thing that really stands out is how crazily he can fight for 3 rounds.
Yeah,
like, he doesn't get tired the way you think he should, looking at his style.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. The way he swings, you're like, oh, he's gonna gas, and then you watch him in the 3rd round, like that Max Griffin fight or the one he had right before that against Lyman Good, and it's always Zaleski like turning things up in the 3rd round to make sure he wins it.
Same with the Akhmedov fight. I mean, Akhmedov's known to gas, but that just made it particularly effective that time. I guess I should just say he's just always in tremendously good shape.
Yeah. So I got to agree. Strickland has rarely been a finisher in his UFC career, and he's usually happy to just kind of try to coast through a fight behind rangy strikes, and that seems like it's made to give Zaleski rounds.
I'll be praying for Sean Strickland, though. Come on, baby. We can do it.
I don't know why. Dude's like a weirdo conspiracy theorist. Is that just like...
Is he? I don't know anything about him as a person. I just like his fights. I find him compelling.
All right. Zaleski is the favorite, opening at -105, adjusting down to -130, and is currently at -135. So that line has not moved at all after initial adjustment. And Strickland opening at -135. So Strickland actually opened as the favorite, but adjusted up to +109, is currently at +110. Very slowly trickling into underdog territory. I'm okay with that, just because Strickland is so tough and he's going to keep that jab out there, and he's huge, which makes him difficult to actually physically control. And
he doesn't throw anything enough, but he does have underrated power.
Yeah,
he's not a bad puncher. Like he's like I said, he's got plenty of avenues.
This should be a close 10-9 round kind of fight, where we're just picking Zaleski based on being more creative and busier and willing to throw power.
Yep.
Brings us to a lightweight bout: Davi Ramos versus Nick Hein, and this should be a perfect fight for Davi Ramos. Should be.
Nick Hein is back up at lightweight.
Yeah, Nick Hein is back up at lightweight, having never actually
fought at one
bantamweight or featherweight, rather.
No,
like he was supposed to for a couple of years, but then the injuries and other stuff, it never happened, and it never will. It seems like. But
Hein's was supposed to fight Zabit.
What?
He was supposed to fight Zabit.
I know. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a more forgiving matchup than that probably would have been.
Much more. Hein's a fighter. I really liked him coming up. He's got a lot of power. He's got a judo game that he can actually use in MMA, and he has some reasonably fundamental basic technique on his punching, which I thought is like, I'm interested to see if this can kind of coalesce into a whole style over time. But it feels like he's never really gotten the training to make that happen. He's still a one-handed, really one-punch fighter. It's just like, here's a big left hook. That's it. Nothing else. And the judo, and while like it leads to some good crushing top control because he's built like a fire hydrant, that top control doesn't actually lead to any offense. He just kind of smothers people until they can stand back up. He's got some decent ground and pound when he can uncork it, but it's kind of the Michel Prazeres problem, where you're like, oh, Prazeres could probably have some really good ground and pound, except the fact that he's 5'2", and anytime he actually moves and creates space, people can just kind of roll him away. So, for Ramos loves that slow-paced, one strike at a time kind of fight that Hein's going to get him or give him. And if Hein defaults to takedowns and trying to get this fight to the ground and throws Ramos down, or if Ramos shoots in, pulls guard, and just kind of bails and tries to lure Hein in and Hein accepts, I have a lot more faith in Ramos's jiu-jitsu game coming out on top of that kind of matchup. And Ramos fights behind a long jab standing, which seems like enough to win the stand-up. So I got to give this fight to Ramos.
Yeah, I mean, I can see Hein playing this correctly and getting a win. Just like if he could play a long outside kind of game, but
if Ramos forgets his jab because of the southpaw matchup, and Hein just does what he normally does and stays way outside and leaps in with huge left hands, this could be the kind of ugly ass split decision where you're deciding it based on who landed 2 power shots per round.
Yeah. Yeah, but the problem with like Hein taking that approach, I think, is that much as with Sultan Aliev against Rolly Alves, like there's just not a lot of depth to it because it's just like a left hand and occasionally a left kick, and every once in a while we have seen some flashes. Hein will try to put a right hook behind that left hand, but very, very rarely.
Yeah,
and Ramos is like really comfortable. Like if you just throw the same shot over and over, he's gonna come over that left hand with the overhand right.
Yeah.
He's going to do that a lot because, like, again, you just give him the same shit to see. He can time it, and he loves to throw same-time counters. He loves to just try to bomb you when you step into the pocket.
Much like Hein, Ramos is the kind of fighter where I look at his basic game, and I'm like, I like everything I see out of this. It just needs more depth.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to continually see more depth come out of Ramos's game as he takes fights. I think the Grutzmacher fight was a good matchup for that because it was a fight that was a guy who just couldn't compete with him anywhere, and it really let him just kind of get rounds in and get time in.
It was a fighter who would bring the fight to him. Like, like it was a test of Ramos's stamina and staying power mentally, because he did start to kind of flag in the second and third rounds, but found a second wind. And so I think it was like an important kind of fight for him to have. But like one of the big problems for Grutzmacher is that he just doesn't throw combinations. Again, he would have stopped Joe Lozon outright and not forced the corner to do it if he had just thrown a few combinations after hurting him in their fight.
Slow to throw combinations. Like by the time he gets the second one thrown.
I mean, maybe that's how he feels, and that's why he doesn't do it. But he still should.
I know.
Yeah, maybe that is his thought process, though. But still, like, it was a good opponent. I think this is a very different style matchup, but similarly a good opponent for developing Davi Ramos, because the limits of Hein's game feel like they'll affect him more in this kind of matchup than Ramos's limits will him.
Yeah, Ramos has multiple ways to finish. Hein pretty much has a big left hand.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to say that on Nick Hein's Wikipedia page, the last entry says, Hein does a very good Arnold Schwarzenegger impression. Good for you, Nick. That's a tough one. Not many people have figured that one out. I'm going with Davi Ramos.
Oh, I like Nick.
He seems like the nicest guy in the world. I'm just saying.
Guy.
You know,
I've talked to him. He's a nice guy.
Also, you're German. How hard can it be to do an Arnold Schwarzenegger impression?
Well, Arnold's Austrian.
Yeah, but he speaks Austrian German. How hard can it be?
I will always love the little factoid that they wouldn't let Arnold Schwarzenegger do his own dubbing for the German version of Terminator. Or no, was it Conan? I think it was. It may have been Conan, actually. They wouldn't let him dub his own voice in German for the German version of Conan because he sounds too much like a farmer. And like nobody will buy him as an action star using his voice in German because
farmer accents are proven to be good for action stars because the pirate accent we know and love is just a West Country English accent.
Yeah, well, fair enough, but
they missed an opportunity.
Germans aren't having it. They won't let Arnold Schwarzenegger in English. He's like, oh yeah, it's badass. In German, it's like, howdy y'all.
I just imagine them listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger speak, and there's just like techno music blaring in this bare concrete Berlin office. Like, nine. No. It's not going to work.
It sounds like a farmer.
It sounds like a farmer. Oh boy.
All right. Anyway, Ramos is the favorite. Opened at plus 145. What the fuck? Dropped down to minus 128 and is currently out at minus 145. Hein opened at minus 185, jumped up to plus 110, and is currently at plus 119. Yeah, I feel like that's...
Someone lost some money on that one.
So, some odds makers just looked at records and were like, well, Hein hasn't lost in forever.
Yeah, that must be it. And the last guy to beat him was James Vick, who's really good now.
Yeah. All right. That brings us to heavyweight bout Aleksei Oleinik versus Junior Albini. And this is
heavyweights.
I believe.
Yeah. Oh boy. So, like the interesting angle here is obviously Junior Albini developing as a fighter, because after looking super duper impressive against Timothy Johnson, he then looked super duper unimpressive against Andrei Arlovski. Although, in fairness, against an Andrei Arlovski who looked better than he had in years.
Yeah,
he looked refreshed and sharp, and
I think it was really a perfect commentary on the where, as a almost pure boxer in MMA, mostly because Albini's legs are too big to like kick with.
Lifting them must be exhausting.
Yeah. As almost a pure boxer in MMA, it was just a complete commentary on where is your boxing. Better than Timothy Johnson's, not as good as Andrei Arlovski's.
Yeah. Know? The thing is like, I feel like Albini is a better boxer than Andrei Arlovski. And that night, Arlovski showed up with some new boxing tricks.
True.
But typically he's just been a flashing left hand, and then everything with actual material effect is the right hand. But yeah, Albini was like, he was also just really weirdly listless. Like, he didn't know how to create the kind of fight he needed without just rushing in and throwing a bunch of punches.
Yeah.
As soon as he wasn't just able to easily land, he was kind of just flummoxed. Like, it was a prospect loss.
Well, yeah, that's why I say I think it was the levels of, striking. Like, his striking is built against guys who can't punch or who can't strike with any depth. It's just like, oh, I can just, as long as I can land forever, then I'll look pretty good.
Yeah, but then he may appear to have more boxing options than Andrei Arlovski, but like strategically, he didn't know how to change his game to adapt to a different style. He's talked about like losing some weight and resharpening his game, and he looks like a fighter who still has a lot of potential. So, I guess the question is like,
has he watched an Aleksei Oleinik fight before? That's really the only question to ask every time anybody fights Aleksei Oleinik.
Why do you say that?
Because it's always like, A, he throws with way more power than you expect.
Yeah.
B, he's still fucking wild and unhinged standing and gasses really quickly. And C, if you're just lazy about it, he will choke the shit out of you in a second. Like, if you're just not, if you're like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll follow him to the ground. Why not? I get top position.
Yeah. You kind of have to be, you have to be asleep at the wheel. Like, Oleinik is definitely, and this is not to disparage Oleinik, who has a very interesting way of fighting. It's just that, like, he is one of those IQ test kind of fighters where it's like, well, you know what he's going to do. And there are such weird, disparate parts of his game that it's like, the gaps are there. Yeah. You just have to actually be looking for them.
It's a testament to the idea that a lot of fighters just don't care about what their opponent's doing and don't focus on it. They don't watch tape. They're not interested, you know?
Yeah, and that was the feeling I got from Albini's last fight. It felt like the kind of fight where he probably will take a different approach this time, but don't know enough about who Albini is as a person or a fighter to say that with confidence. So I'm going to pick him because like he's got good enough footwork. He's got good straight, quick punches. He throws combinations. He can counter quite well. If somebody is just swinging huge arcing punches at him, there's just way too many opportunities for him to do the kind of thing he does well in this matchup. But if he is still careless, that's exactly why you have a guy like Aleksei Oleinik around, because you just can't fall asleep. He'll catch you.
Yeah, the actual thing now that I'm seeing that gives me some real pause with Albini is the fact that early in his career, he's got a bunch of funky ass submissions. Like heel hook, arm bar, arm triangle choke, you know, like things where I'm like, for a heavyweight, I'm like, how were you doing these things?
Who were you fighting?
And it makes me wonder if any of that is still in his game.
I would love to see him go for a heel hook on Aleksei.
I would too.
Can you imagine that?
Because otherwise, like the guy who Albini has slowly turned himself into is somebody who basically is just a boxer. He's just a heavyweight boxer.
Just a pretty good style to have at heavyweight.
Yeah, it's a totally fine style at heavyweight. It's a style that will absolutely beat Aleksei Oleinik. If you're not out trying to grapple with Aleksei Oleinik and you're just going to force him to throw haymakers at you for more than a round, he will exhaust himself, unquestionably. He's 50. He doesn't have a gas tank anymore. He doesn't even have a knee anymore.
He's got one leg. Aleksei Oleinik.
He's a 50-year-old one-legged man.
Well, I'm becoming a bigger fan of Aleksei Oleinik by the second as you describe him. I'm realizing how much I really like him.
You know, it's the whole Travis Brown thing where Travis Brown will find a way to lose with whatever his opponent gives him. Aleksei Oleinik, weird chokes, I guess.
Yep. That's why he is the perfect, like if you are a Travis Brown type fighter, Aleksei Oleinik will get you.
Yep. And as long as Albini just keeps his standing, works for clinches, boxes, watches for takedowns, he should be totally fine and win this win a late TKO or a decision just because he's got a pretty good gas tank and can stay busy.
Yeah. Again, I don't say this to disparage Oleinik. It feels like a matchup where it's like, is Albini overlooking him?
Yeah. Also,
like if he does,
like a Ukrainian militia leader, so it's like a militia leader in the whole like Russo-Ukrainian border war stuff. So
he is.
Yeah.
How's he making time to fight?
I don't know. So your life spared him a little.
What a life. No, I'm just saying that, like, I don't mean just stylistically, if Albini overlooks Oleinik in any way, Oleinik is one of those fighters who will shock you with how much thought there is to his game, that he is always looking for an exploit.
Oh, yeah. He's got tricks that people aren't training for, that he will, if you give him an opening for one of them, he'll land it.
Yeah. His style is weird, but it's not bad or dumb. It just works in a very narrow type of fight.
And when he was younger and had actual speed to him, the fact that he had some shocking power in his hands was big because people just didn't, they would know about weird chokes and then he would just land some bomb standing and it would, it was like the Jared Rosholt fight where it's like, oh yeah, Aleksei Oleinik, I got to watch out for his weird chokes. Jared Rosholt coming out, I'm going to kickbox him and just gets knocked the fuck out.
Did you know Lineker lost a fight to Chael Sonnen in 2006?
Doesn't seem right, does it?
Anyway, that's the cue to move on is when I bring up an irrelevant.
Yep. All right. Odds for the fight. Junior Albini opened at -120 and has slowly trickled down to -156. Aleksei Oleinik opened at -120 as well, so he opened dead even and has slowly moved upward and is now at +129. I think those odds are going exactly the right way, and they could bear to get a little wider than that. mostly just because Oleinik is old and increasingly looks like a worn-out fighter. He's 40, and he's had multiple knee surgeries, and every fight, even ones he's won recently, he's gassed out within a round.
And he's got a militia to think about.
That's right. He's got to lead Russians against Ukraine in the Russian-Ukrainian border war.
Yep. I'm definitely rooting for a particular side in that conflict. It's very easy to figure out who's the good guy.
All right.
Okay, it's the Russians because Aleksei Oleinik's on their side.
Okay, whatever. Then we're done. Let's not get ourselves like hacked and our computers ransomware over this. Middleweight bout, last bout on the prelims. Cezar Ferreira, Karl Roberson, in a fight that makes me say, "The fuck." Basics on this are that Cezar Ferreira should win this fight. If he doesn't, it will be purely because Karl Roberson catches him with a huge shot and knocks him out. Karl Roberson was incredibly proud of his his sort of like body lock throw to rear naked choke on Darren Stewart, and was like, yeah, I can do everything. But that was also like one of those fights where you're watching that, you're like, wow, that's a terrible referendum on Darren Stewart.
Darren Stewart looked awful in that fight.
Looked terrible.
Yep.
And getting choked out by a kickboxer who came to MMA late and is kind of like getting jiu-jitsu and wrestling along the way.
Yeah, this isn't revisionism, by the way. Like, Darren Stewart started that fight on the feet and was just like throwing spinning kicks like 8 feet away.
Yeah.
He looked awful from the very beginning. He looked like he had no idea what he was trying to do.
It looked it was weird because Darren Stewart, typically, I liked Darren Stewart going up because he was this very push into the clinch, constant pressure, throw power shots. That was his whole game. And then in that fight, he just looked totally gun shy. And eventually when he pushed in for takedowns, like I say, Roberson hit that body lock throw and then got the ready choke. Anyway, point being, Ferreira has become a much, much more intelligent fighter over time. He's figured out, mostly built around the idea that he's learned he has a bad chin. He initially tried to solve having a bad chin by going to welterweight, where he got melted by Jorge Masvidal in one of those fights where you're like, Jorge Masvidal fought Cezar Ferreira?
Yeah.
The fuck?
And got a first-round knockout in the clinch? Yeah, everything about that was weird.
Ever since that fight, though, Ferreira has been a picture of control. A picture of control, calm, from outside. And that can be defeated by somebody like Elias Theodorou, who just pours on volume at all times and is just like, I'm going to throw 8 billion kicks at you, and if you're not going to take control of the fight, I'll just win on points. But otherwise, it's meant that he's, he doesn't get himself in danger to get hit a lot. He lands big power shots occasionally. He's got a good takedown and grappling game that he can go to when he needs it. And he just tends to keep the fight in control at a slow pace and depend on his athletic gifts to take over single bursts of offense. And Roberson, what I've seen out of him, honestly, is a guy who tends to be willing to give up control and fight at a slower pace, but can land with big power. It's sort of like Darren Stewart going after Karl Roberson got Darren Stewart thrown and choked out. Ryan Spahn going after Karl Roberson got Ryan Spahn elbowed into unconsciousness on Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. So there's power there. There's the kind of one-shot power that if he just catches Ferreira, he could put him away. But if he's going to fight a slow-paced fight, waiting for Ferreira to give him openings to land something big, I don't think Ferreira is going to give him that. I think Ferreira is going to be happy to have the slow-paced fight, pick the better opportunities, pick the better moments, and just generally win rounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, counter kicks with takedowns. Like there's a lot of ways that Ferreira can
Roberson's an amazingly inexperienced combat sports athlete, and he seems dynamic and powerful, but it seems mostly like he's got some basic tools to beat other really inexperienced fighters, and Ferreira's a really well-seasoned veteran at this point.
Yeah, I can't really add too much to that. Like, I will say that Roberson's tendency to do really well in the clinch is maybe a concern. Ferreira has been a little inactive there before, and it's part of what got him in trouble against Jorge Masvidal. But there's a couple really narrow openings for a guy like Roberson who just doesn't have that much to his game, doesn't have that much experience, just hasn't seen a lot of what a guy like Ferreira can do yet. And I guess all I can really say is more of a critique of the matchmaking. Like, why is this fight happening? It's to get Cezar Ferreira a win in Brazil, I guess. But I assumed that they were viewing Karl Roberson as
it seems more like a thing of Karl Roberson's had a couple of big exciting fights. Let's see if we can skyrocket him to the top.
Yeah. Basically, it's the UFC being as impatient as they always are with their fighters and being like, okay, he beat Darren Stewart. I guess he's ready for a fighter who's 10 times better than Darren Stewart. So, I don't know. He'll be fine after this loss, I hope. He's 27, so it's probably fine. But it seems like a pretty easy pick for Ferreira. Unless the UFC were also thinking, maybe he'll get hit on the chin.
Yeah, because like I said, I think Roberson does have the power.
Oh yeah, he's dangerous. He's super dynamic, and he's not shy about chasing openings. Like, it's a kind of fight he can win. It's a fight he's likely to win.
It's not the kind of fight he's set up to win.
No, not at all.
Of course, the amazing thing here is that he's favored. Roberson opened at minus 130, dropped down to minus 158, and in the last day has jumped way back up to minus 125. So some correcting going on in those odds late. But he's been favored most of this time, and Ferreira opened at minus 120, so they actually opened pretty much even. And oh wait, no, that's Oleinik. Whoops, wrong line. Ferreira opened at minus 110, so still close to even, jumped way up to plus 130, and has just dropped in the past day to plus 102. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ferreira is a slight favorite on fight day, if the odds keep trending that way. And bettors are coming in at the last minute and looking for lines that seem off. But I'm interested.
The betting pool is so small that me just now putting $3 on Cezar Ferreira is probably enough to swing him into a favorite. So we'll see.
Otherwise, I mean, it's clear people. Roberson has impressed with his moments, so I can see the hype there. But the depth of competition and his skill set in general just does not seem very deep to me yet.
This is a very risky matchup.
Yeah. And you can say, like, oh, well, he's got legit high-level kickboxing experience, too. And it's like, yeah, he went 0-3 as a pro kickboxer. Like, I mean, she fought Jerome LeBanner and Dustin Jacoby, who's pretty good on the American scene these days. But being winless as a kickboxer doesn't necessarily make me bet, like, oh, well, he can just take over fights with his striking.
Yeah.
All right.
It's like the UFC is like a talent agent. They see, like, Karl Roberson do like one trick on a slack line on a beach somewhere in California, and they're like, perfect, kid, I got the great gig for you. And then, like, next thing he knows, he's walking a tightrope across the Grand Canyon. It's like, no, you inferred too much, Mr. Talent Agent. You needed to bring him along slowly.
Yeah. All right. And of course, he's probably just going to knock Ferreira out, and then everybody will be like, yeah, whatever, you guys suck. I know.
Yeah.
But whatever. Up next, middleweight bout, Vitor Belfort, Lyoto Machida, and yeah. Go for it, Connor.
This matchup sucks.
How excited you are for this fight. That 5 years ago you would have been thrilling over.
Absolutely. This is the worst time in history yet to be a Lyoto Machida fan, and then next year will be an even worse time in history to be a Lyoto Machida fan until the day he retires, because it's abundantly clear that Machida is past it.
Yeah.
He can't take a shot that well.
The worst part is that it turns out that he was never actually a really powerful striker. He just was really fast and had great timing. And since speed and timing tend to go first, now he's just not Lyoto Machida anymore.
He's got nothing that makes him Lyoto Machida. Yeah, he's like his game has always been, and he's never had like that much. I don't know if I should call it depth or breadth, but he's never really had much past that first big counter either. Like,
well, he had that small the Machida boxing period where,
there was a Mousasi fight where he was like countering with hooks and stuff.
Yeah, the Weidman and the Mousasi fight where like he knew he needed to change from the classic one punch thing, and he still had the speed and timing to do something else.
Yeah,
so he did that, but now the speed and timing's gone, so that version of Machida is vanished.
Now he doesn't, and now stylistically he seems to revert it to classic Machida, which at this point I don't know if it would be a good idea for him to keep pushing the changes he was trying to make, because there were still some very risky moments in those fights where it's like, ooh, you are just learning how to do this and you're not really that comfortable with how things like head movement and combination punching actually work. So maybe that's a wise choice, but also withdrawing to the classic Machida game means that as an old, slow man who can't pull the trigger, you are relying on a game that is very much not that. Like, it's a young man's fighting style. It's all about the pinpoint accuracy and timing of single decisive counter strikes.
So here's the part where you say that he probably still beats Vitor Belfort.
I don't fucking know what happens, Zane. I have no idea. Like, Vitor Belfort looks better than Lyoto Machida. Vitor Belfort in old age looks more like himself near his prime than Machida does right now.
Yeah, Belfort's actually never really gotten slower.
Right. He still looks like a good athlete. He still has pretty good timing. His durability has suffered as well, but he still has, like, he's always had power. So he has that to rely on where Lyoto doesn't. Like, he has, I think his game just has more like old man crutches than Machida's does built into it, because some of it's just based on swinging bombs, and Machida can't do that. So, like, but it might also just last for like 2 minutes.
Or 15. Imagine if it lasts for 15.
Yeah, well, I mean, his gas tank might only last for 2 minutes.
True. Yeah.
But it might, if it lasts for 15, his stamina even, that might be worse, because that means he's not doing anything. And Lyoto Machida is not going to...
We saw Belfort versus Marquardt.
Right.
They're just happy to like high five and watch each other be old.
Yeah, I didn't hate that fight. I know I'll say this every time it gets brought up. I know everybody else on Earth hated it. It was okay because I went into it with very low expectations. I'm watching.
But you went into it thinking you were going to see an old man die.
Yeah, and I didn't, so I was pleasantly surprised. No, but I went into that fight. Like, the reason that was sort of enjoyable is that it was the same guy fighting himself. Like, there's Marquardt and Vitor are so similar in so many ways. Here, it's like Machida's style is too negative for me to like know that both he and Vitor are looking for that big shot. So the tension's not even going to be there. I'm going to pick Vitor Belfort. I think it's going to be real sad when he knocks out Lyoto Machida in the first round. If that doesn't happen, it'll probably be even worse objectively, because it'll be a really boring, slow 15-minute fight.
Yeah, I'm picking Lyoto to get the knockout.
Ooh, I hope so, man.
Vitor to chase him down, and like, we're going to get a classic Machida left hand at some point, but it's going to be like literally after 10 minutes of them just looking at each other and Machida moving backwards and Vitor moving forwards, and neither of them throwing anything at all.
Yeah.
And then Machida will get the knockout, and people will be like, oh, Machida's back. And he'll be like, yeah, see, I'm back. He has 5 more fights. And we'll be like, no, God, don't.
It's like, at this point, the worst thing that could happen for me is if Lyoto Machida wins, because he's going to keep fighting then.
Yeah. People are saying, like, oh, I think TRT Vitor is going to come back because it's his last fight and it's in Brazil and all that. And no, I think he's past that. I don't think you can expect any sort of redemption to come out of this fight.
All you can do is laugh. I mean, how far the mighty fall? Over and over again. That's how it works.
Yeah. All right. Machida is the favorite right now, a prohibitive favorite, in fact, given the way that this fight likely goes. Opened at minus 120, adjusted down to minus 210, is currently out at minus 268. And Vitor Belfort opened at minus 120, adjusted up to plus 172, and is currently up at plus 216. So,
I mean, did people watch the Eric Anders fight? Like, just because Machida has a recent win, that there is no justification for him being that big of a favorite over Vitor.
no, not at this stage.
Vitor won his last fight too against himself, so he's still capable.
All right, that brings us to a bantamweight bout: John Lineker versus Brian Kelleher. And I'm really looking forward to this. This is like the fight on the card I'm most looking forward to, unquestionably. And I think if John Lineker loses this, it is a referendum on the idea that something has changed when he broke his hand.
Or his jaw, wasn't it?
Or was it his jaw? I thought
Dillashaw broke his jaw.
Dillashaw jaw broke his jaw, and then he had a tooth infection afterward. I thought he also broke his hand. Maybe not, but
I would be shocked if John Lineker has never broken his hand.
Okay. So either something changed. If he loses, it's a referendum. Something has changed when he broke his jaw, or that the ceiling on him is the same as it's ever been, and you don't have to be that good to find it. You just have to be the right fighter. Because Kelleher, the way Kelleher comes in, like, he just kind of picks his time, and he's like, okay, I'm coming in, I'm throwing hands. And his defense gets a little better as the fight goes on, as he gets more time to figure out, as he gets more, as he sees more of his opponents. Oh my God, somebody actually did in his Wikipedia entry, somebody did actually put Whitey Mouse as his nickname.
Did they really?
Yes.
That's pretty good.
Because he does look exactly like Demetrius Johnson.
Does he? I've never noticed.
No? Go look at Brian Kelleher.
I have to look at Brian Kelleher. I know already. I can picture his ears in my head, and I know that's part of it. Does look quite a lot like Demetrius Johnson.
He does, doesn't he?
Quite a lot, actually.
Yeah. Anyway,
it's perfect.
Anyway, that aside, Kelleher, especially early in fights, he tends to just kind of pick a spot where he's going to come forward throwing bombs and just go after it. And when he has to retreat, he's not that mindful of his defense at all. So it's mostly how he picks up defense as fights go on is when he picks his spots to come in, he gets better about moving his head on offline when he comes in, and then getting back out. He gets a better sense of his opponent's timing and where they're throwing strikes. But he's always very hittable. And he's very willing to kickbox in fights. Like, he's very willing to just have a hittable volume kickboxing game. He's a good wrestler when he can get takedowns, but he's also, as we've seen in the past, a hyper aggressive ground and pound artist when he gets people down. So he doesn't tend to keep people down very well, because he just will take them down and just kind of open up and start throwing bombs and looking to do damage. And it's also gotten him submitted. Not that I think Lineker is going to submit him. But overall, it should mean that he's just running into John Lineker's wheelhouse over and over again, especially early. And I don't see him getting the time to figure Lineker out if that's how he's going to approach this fight. And if that's not how he's going to approach this fight, then he's just going to give Lineker exactly the fight he wants, which is Lineker on the front foot, getting to stalk you, getting to pick when he makes his entries and throws his shots. And like I say, Kelleher on his back foot is not really a great defensively mindful fighter.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like a pick your poison fight for Kelleher, and if he wins, it's going to be because Lineker literally just isn't going to be isn't a good enough wrestler to stay up long enough,
or something has fundamentally changed for him.
Yeah, something has fundamentally changed in his willingness to let his hands go.
Yeah.
So, because he did look a little uncomfortable in that Marlon Vera fight, but Vera, as we know, is a fighter who's hyper comfortable being on the back foot, being defensive, letting you come forward, and then picking places to pick you off when you come in. And that's just not a style that Kelleher really has.
Yeah, I'll say, like, that's not really what allowed Chito to hang in with Lineker.
No, it's not.
Like, Chito Vera is MMA's Adrian Broner, where he thinks he's an outfighter and he thinks he's like a counterpuncher, but like the moment at which he just starts to come forward and throw lots of shit is every single time the moment at which he starts winning the fight. Aggression is what he should be doing. And when he started to pressure John Lineker, that was the thing that makes me think like maybe something's different. Lineker really did not like that pressure. He looked like almost dispirited to me at the end of that fight.
So there is that feeling of like, is something wrong, or is he just rusty at like coming in off that, not feeling it for that time, and then he had that fight and he's gonna be like, okay, you know what, my jaw's fine now. I think I can go out and do it.
Yeah, and if he was concerned about his jaw, as most people assumed, he was a little more reticent up to that point in the fight too than he normally would have been. He was still letting the big combinations go but fighting more in bursts.
Yeah, which is also why, which I would account for in part being knowledge of Vera's style of like, I'm gonna let you come to me and then I'm gonna throw a huge counter knee or something like that. Yeah.
But it makes it kind of imperative who gets to come forward in this fight. Like that was already a big question for this kind of style matchup. But if there is something wonky going on with Lineker, or like, then that might allow Kelleher's very willing, as you said, and he's aggressive. He does he does have okay defensive movement. He's very flowy once the fight gets going. Not always in like the prettiest way, but he just likes to like
take him like a round and a half. Or even 2 rounds, and then suddenly in the 3rd round, you're like, oh, well, why don't you move like this all the time?
But he just loves like riding the wave of what's happening in the fight. He is a live/die by the sword kind of fighter, and loves to be in the fight. He's not a negative fighter in any way.
Yeah,
and that that's why we're both interested in this fight more than anything else on the card, because it's gonna be 2 guys just trying to myrtleize each other. But yeah, like that means there's potentially, again, it's hard to analyze because we don't know where Lineker's at. We don't know what to read out of the fight with Vera, but that makes for a pretty significant X factor, in my mind, that Kelleher might have a real shot here if something's going on with John. But if John Lineker is classic John Lineker, then Kelleher is just way too like that's like, you don't want to be riding whatever is currently happening in the fight against John Lineker. You know what I mean? That is a recipe.
You don't want to be the guy who's like, well, I'll meet you on your own terms. Great.
Exactly. Then you're Francisco Rivera. Then you are just getting destroyed with a quickness. So, but Kelleher's like tricky enough, like spinning back fists, weird stuff, plus takedowns, that even in those crazy exchanges, he could get into trouble and then surprise Lineker and change the tone of the fight. So I'm excited. I'm going to trust in John Lineker's consistency and assume he's going to show up looking like himself, but I'm interested to see if he doesn't.
Yeah, I'm picking Lineker as well, but like I say, I feel like if he loses this fight, it will say either he's not himself or wrestling like any kind of consistent, good, reasonable wrestling game can do what, like Tim Elliott did to him, or like Ali Bagatinov. Although, wait, no, he didn't fight Tim Elliott, did he? What am I thinking
I don't think so. Ian McCall took him down before getting scared off by a guillotine.
Ian McCall took him down. I don't know what I was
McCall
thinking.
out wrestled him like as impressively as Dillashaw did until
Yeah.
the moment that Lineker scared him off.
I'm thinking of Ali Bagotinov, who was just
yeah.
able to take him down over and over again and just kind of shut his game out. And
maybe it's because of what the bantamweight division looks like, but he hasn't really fought any takedown artists besides Bagotinov and Dillashaw.
I know, which is why I wonder, like, it could be that will just, like I say, it'll either be a referendum that a hard wrestling attack is just going to always throw him off his game, or it's a referendum that he doesn't pull the trigger like he used to. But until I see either of those, I think Lineker generally looks like he knows how to get his strikes off while defending takedowns for the most part.
Yep.
And like he is, and in the past, he's been more than capable. If you're willing to meet him on his terms, he will fight you harder and better on those terms.
Yeah. So. Kelleher is even built like Demetrius Johnson, isn't he?
Yeah. Like
he has those short little legs and like the wide shoulders.
That Whitey Mouse nickname, it's going to be a hard one to shake.
Spot on, man. It is perfect.
Lineker opened at minus 320, adjusted up to minus 200, and has slowly trickled back down to minus 253. Kelleher opened at plus 240, dropped down to plus 172, and is currently rising up to plus 204. I'm reasonably comfortable with those odds. I feel like Lineker's done enough work at this point in the UFC to earn that trust where, like, the Renan Barão fight, it's a great win on paper, but it's also the kind of win where, like, going in, I picked him to win that Renan Barão fight for exactly the reasons he won it, which are mostly that Barão folds with pressure.
Yeah. We honestly, like, the best wins on Kelleher's record are still the 2 over Julio Arce.
Yeah.
In my mind. And otherwise, his 4 wins in the UFC, Yuri Alcantara, more
3.
inconsistent than ever. 3 wins, sorry. Damian Stasiak, getting better, but still remarkably inconsistent. And Renan Barão
just can't compete with him athletically at all.
Yeah. And Renan Barão clearly declining in more ways than one. So it's like, we can question what kind of style matchups Lineker might be susceptible to, but it's hard to really draw a ton of concrete evidence from Kelleher's wins either.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to women's strawweight bout: Mackenzie Dern versus Amanda Cooper. That's you.
Oh, it's me. They're setting Mackenzie Dern up to win, and I think that's fine.
Yep.
And I think they're doing a good job of it. I actually quite like this matchup because I think Amanda Cooper is like kind of similar to Ashley Yoder, who Mackenzie Dern just beat. Has also shown like some improved sharpness and decision making in recent fights. So maybe a slight step up in that regard, where it's like, oh, she's kind of figuring out how her game should work.
I read an interview with her just a couple days ago that Tim Bissell did over on Bloody Elbow on our main site. And Cooper struck me as somebody who has a very good idea of exactly what's going on and like how Dern fights and what what she needs to bring to the table and what Dern's bringing to the table and all that. So that's a good sign at the very least.
I like this. I see this as like a slight notch up from the Yoder fight, because in that fight with Magana, like, it looked like Amanda Cooper was maybe figuring some things out and starting to order her game in a way that made sense. Whereas previously she was like, the reason I compare her to Yoder is because a fighter who can clearly do a lot of things very well, but with no consistency or structure.
Yeah, the fight. I always defined her as a fighter who will let the fight go wherever her opponent wants it to go.
Right. And until I see that decisively stopped, then I have to assume Mackenzie Dern's going to beat her, because Dern, at the very least, showed that she is comfortable applying some kind of pressure and continually pushing for the takedown, even if she has a really hard time getting it. And up to this point, Amanda Cooper has been absolutely terrible at stopping takedowns.
Yep.
So and far too willing, like Yoder, to grapple once she is taken down. So the avenue for her, like the kind of fight she needs to fight, is pretty clear. But I just haven't seen her fight that kind of fight yet.
Yeah, Cooper. Like there were a few flashes of it against Magana where Cooper was showing like, oh, I'm just gonna stay outside. I'm gonna hop in and back out. I'm gonna use a couple of long power shots and all that. But then she still let herself get like tied up into the clinch, and then eventually defaulted to a wrestling game against Magana while lighting her up standing, which is great. Like she was totally dominant on the ground too in that fight. It was fine, but it does make me wonder. It's like, are you always going to default to doing other things in the fight?
Was it just because she was fighting Magana and felt that it would work, or will she try that against Dern?
Yeah,
and if like the unspoken implication of all of this is Cooper, like almost every woman in this division, is in trouble once it goes to the ground with Dern.
Yeah,
Dern's just a phenomenal grappler.
And the other thing is, honestly, that in and out, pick my spots, be kind of flighty, and move back and forth. Like she doesn't work that behind a jab. She's almost always throwing big power shots.
Yeah.
And Dern has a sellout pressure striking style that is ugly as shit. But it is completely sold on pressure. And she does it like just doing that is enough that if you're just kind of like trying to move in and out and pick my spots and throw one strike every 20 seconds to somebody who's just bullying forward and is like, well, I'm just going to I'm going to get a body lock as quick as I can and you're going to have to deal with it. They can, I trust that to throw Cooper off her game more than I trust Cooper to use footwork to just stay away from Dern.
Yeah, this may be the most comical comparison I could possibly make, just based on their relative appearances. But Mackenzie Dern's striking is like Dan Kelly's striking, where it's like it's not even as technically clean as Dan Kelly's striking.
Darren Elkins, especially like back in the day, Darren.
Yeah. Where it's like it's not clean. It doesn't look nice. You're open constantly, but you're constantly making decisions that make the other person react to what you're doing. And yeah, that can get you surprisingly far if you have, especially if Dern has put a little bit of work in on her wrestling. That striking game could probably take her shockingly far in this division if she could just get takedowns more easily.
It'll at least you at least kind of have to trust to take her past a 3-3 opponent who's been fighting for 3 years and just doesn't have much technical depth to her game. I like where Cooper's head is at, and I like what I see out of how her game is developing. But it's the kind of thing where it's just, maybe 4 years from now, Amanda Cooper is going to be a much better fighter than Mackenzie Dern because Mackenzie Dern will have never closed the gaps in her style while Cooper continues to develop. But right now, Dern has one deep skill area, and Cooper has none.
Yeah. That's why I like this matchup though. Like it is the kind of fight where Dern she's got the weight of her name and she's the one who's favored for obvious reasons, but like it'd be a really important win for Amanda Cooper if she wins here. And it's not like she's being thrown in there for no reason. Mackenzie Dern is raw in so many ways that if Cooper just turns that one corner that kind of makes the whole game click, she could definitely win this kind of matchup.
Any strawweight in that division who can focus on staying on her feet can beat Mackenzie Dern.
Yeah, exactly.
The possibility is open. Odds on the fight. Let's see. Dern is the underdog, or is the favorite rather, not the underdog. A really big favorite. Opened at -530. Adjusting up and down to -258, and it stayed more or less stable there at -252 now. And Cooper opened at +350, adjusted down to +216, and is currently out at +202 at the moment.
All this shows is that the vast majority of people are even worse at betting than I am because they place their bets based on who have I heard of, rather than like what's actually a good bet to make. There's no reason for Mackenzie Dern to be a +500 favorite over virtually any fighter at this point in her career.
No. All right. That brings us to our co-main event, middleweight scrap. Jacare Souza, Kelvin Gastelum, and I am prepared to shock the world. I'm picking Jacare.
Didn't shock me as much as you maybe hoped it would.
No, I said that mostly for effect.
Okay, I want to make sure I wasn't too disappointingly stoic in reacting.
I'm picking
to it.
Meteor Strike.
I'm going to shock the world. I think the asteroid which destroys the entire human race will connect in Rio during this fight.
Yeah.
Wow, you really shocked me there, Zane. I thought you were just going to pick Jacare.
Honestly, I really want to pick Gastelum, and
Yeah.
he could absolutely knock Jacare out at some point. But Jacare is still not an easy fighter to beat. I think that's one of the things that's kind of gotten overlooked as he's gotten older. You know, a lot of people look at Jacare and they look at the way he fights now, and they look at him from him in his prime, and they're like, "Oh, he's lost a step," and he lost to, you know, he got knocked out by Robert Whittaker, and he lost to Yoel Romero. So he's clearly just
Both of them suck.
Yeah, both of them suck, but he's clearly just not as good a fighter as he used to be, and he's clearly done. Jacare's done. I mean, it's like you actually watch Jacare fight,
yeah,
because he did really well in round 1 against Robert Whittaker, maybe even won that round, and then otherwise, like, the parts of his game still function. That split decision, of course, to Yoel Romero was super iffy, and he comes out against Derek Brunson and just owned him.
You know how like Chris Camozzi got cut from the UFC and then like reminded us all what it takes to be a successful UFC fighter when he like broke a dude's leg and knocked out Jeremy Kimball, who is now himself a UFC fighter.
Yeah,
that was what it was like when Jacare fought Derek Brunson. It's like a useful reminder of this is what like a top 3 fighter can do to a normal UFC fighter.
And the big thing for me is Gastelum, unlike Brunson, Gastelum actually has some technique to his strikes and a lot of patience. He's got a good gas tank. So the further this goes down the stretch, he could totally win it. Absolutely. And he's got one punch power. He's just not a good decision maker. And he, in fact, may be far too calm for his own good. And he also, his game has not really evolved at all, weirdly. You know?
That's the big thing. Phil was talking about this with us after last week's Depressed Us, and I've been thinking about it ever since. Like, oh my God, he's the same. He's been the same this whole time.
And it all seems connected with like the lack of, you know, it's like the lack of proper diet control, the lack of any sort of aggression or sort of drive in fight, and the lack of development as a fighter. You kind of got to think of them. I got to think that that's all part of one personality,
right,
coming together there, and it puts him in really bad positions. You know, it gets him taken down and then body locked and just like frozen against the fence for a couple of minutes on end by Tim Kennedy. It gets him taken down repeatedly and his back instantly taken multiple times by Chris Weidman. And it is, you know, it loses him multiple rounds against Neil Magny. When late in that fight, it was pretty apparent, like, oh, you can just light Neil Magny up whenever you feel like it. Why did you lose 2 full rounds to him? You know?
Yeah.
And
the man whose life seems to lack structure.
Yeah. So if that's the case, Jacare is just way too dangerous to be lackadaisical around. If Kelvin Gastelum is just going to sit there and wait on Jacare for a round and just see what he does and just wait and look for an opportunity to throw a left hand and let himself get body locked, let himself get dragged to the ground, and just because in the Weidman fight it was very apparent. It's like, oh, you can take me down. I'll just stand up. It's fine. I'll just like claw my way back up and let you expend your energy, and then I'll do what I need to when I have to. And he almost knocked Weidman out doing that. So, there's a certain logic to it, but he ended up getting choked out for the exact same reason.
Yep. He still fights like a welterweight. Like,
yeah.
Even I remember in that fight, Weidman locked a Kimura up, and Gastelum just like stood up with the Kimura on his arm. He muscled his way out of it, and it did show like, holy shit, Kelvin Gastelum is strong even at middleweight.
Yeah.
But as a former welterweight, should you be using strength in that way?
Yeah.
To escape from positions in middleweight, it's like Weidman's twice your size, dude. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, he's an absurd athlete, which is part of why I think he's so underdeveloped, because he just knows he can rely on it. He can bank on it. He doesn't have to do he doesn't have to work that hard at anything because it all comes easily. And Jacare is a dude who clearly just works hard at everything, along with being an absurd athlete and a huge middleweight. Dude's big. And so if Jacare goes after him and gets a body lock and takes him down, I got to pick Jacare in that fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the reason that you didn't really shock me because I'm like not to bury the lead. I'm picking Gastelum here, but like by a hair.
Yeah.
Because I could see on the surface, I think this is a bad style matchup for Kelvin Gastelum.
Yeah. I need to see Jacare be a little more shot than he is to pick against him.
Yeah, I just get the sense like Jacare's inactivity as he gets older is a big issue. He used to be a lot more more active with his pressure. Now he'll cut off the cage, but Gastelum, a big problem for Gastelum is how willing he is to just wait and wait and wait and not do anything. And that's less of an issue if Jacare is not consistently attacking him. And consistently like turning those attacks into takedowns, especially. And then that's compounded for me by the fact that I don't really trust Jacare's gas tank all that much anymore. I always feel when an older fighter becomes really inactive, not from fight to fight, but within the fight, they stop throwing very much, that it's usually like, well, they feel tired more easily than they used to. Which may not be the case. It may just be that Jacare doesn't feel as fast, doesn't feel as and he's a thoughtful, careful fighter, doesn't want to leave his chin out there. And so he throws less and chooses his spots more. And I mean, certainly in the Romero fight, it was Romero who got tired, not Jacare, despite getting obliterated in the first round. He was the one who won the third. Or who was at least still there in the third. But yeah, like if Jacare gets tired, or if in trying to avoid getting tired, he doesn't do much, Gastelum can fight a truly awful fight like he did against Weidman. And I do want to emphasize, I think he fought a terrible fight against Chris Weidman. I don't think he made any of the right decisions. First of all, if you're fighting Chris Weidman, you pressure him. Yeah. That's the one thing he can't deal with. Everybody knows that. You just back him into the fence and throw combinations. Gastelum didn't even try. It's just like the Magny fight. He was like awed by Weidman's size or something and just didn't do anything.
I don't think he feels like he has to. I think he just feels like he can wait.
Yeah. I mean, in truth, he's not really a great pressure fighter. He never really has been. He likes to kind of like float around on the outside and dart in and out with these actually, like Pat was saying on Heavy Hands, like he's kind of becoming mostly a counter fighter, which he kind of is. Yeah. He's pretty good at it. But you don't want to be counter fighting against a big dude like Jacare. So really, this just comes down to me not trusting Jacare more than it does me thinking this is a kind of fight that's bad for him, because in a lot of ways it favors him. I just think if Gastelum lands that one shot that put Weidman on his ass, it'll probably knock Jacare out.
Yeah. So. It's just, that's the other thing to me, though, is that Jacare hasn't been going out to one shot yet.
True.
You know? Even the knockout to Robert Whittaker was like a head kick and follow-up punches. And he got hurt. He got even stung a couple times in the first round and still bounced back in the second.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's not like Jacare gets hurt and he's like, that's not, he can't take it. It's I have yet to see that his chin really fail him. And so until I see a few more signs of like something going, I just can't see all the bad decisions that Gastelum made against Weidman and think, yeah, but he'll beat Jacare.
I think you could say yours is the more rational pick in a lot of ways. Like Jacare is akin to Chris Weidman in so many ways. He's almost the same kind of fighter. And so like it's not a bad matchup for him. I think he's got a very good chance of winning.
Jacare is in fact favored in this matchup, which actually surprises me. I would expect him to be the underdog, frankly.
Makes sense though.
I hear a lot more people talking about how Jacare has passed it. And
yeah, I feel like maybe that's an overreaction to the fact that so many people were shocked when Robert Whittaker beat him.
Yeah.
But they were like, they still thought of Jacare as like an unbeatable, like, oh, he's going to fight Rockhold and then he'll be the champion kind of fighter.
Yeah.
But also, like, people just didn't understand how good Robert
Whittaker was. High five to us for picking Whittaker.
Same. We all recognized how damn good Robert Whittaker was before he got his first really big win.
Yep. Jacare opened at -135, adjusted up and down, and is slowly to -120, and is slowly slid out to -148. So his odds getting a little longer on him over time. Gastelum opening at -105, adjusting up and down to -105, and has slowly worked his way up to +123. I'm surprised those odds are getting longer. I'm surprised Gastelum isn't. I mean, I'm glad they're close. I think they should be close. I think Gastelum has shown time and time again that he has more than enough power in any one shot to seriously hurt somebody. And as he showed against Tim Kennedy, he can wait you out and just pour offense on you until you're done if you gas. So there's certainly a lot to be said for that, but it just means, to me, it just means fighting your way through Jacare's ground game, which I don't trust.
Yeah, even having recognized the greatness of Robert Whittaker doesn't mean I wasn't nervous when Jacare took him down and almost got his back in their fight. Like, that is still something to be feared.
Yeah.
He's
and Whittaker is insanely tough to take down in a way Gastelum frankly isn't, because Gastelum is just kind of lackadaisical. Once again,
you could say not only is Whittaker a better takedown defender, he's also a better scrambler.
Yeah.
Gastelum is actually like, he's a good scrambler, but he's just not urgent enough.
Actually partially what is worrying for me too, and why I'm happier to pick Jacare is if you look at the Weidman fight and the Kennedy fight, Gastelum is very willing to roll and give and accept guard when he scrambles. Like, if you take him down and he's turtled, he will immediately roll to his back and try to roll through and like go for a leg or go for an arm and give top position up in ways that make me like, you can't do that against Jacare.
No. No, he just can't.
So
yeah, I'm feeling like I should have picked Jacare now, but
yeah, that he's gonna knock Jacare out and we're both gonna be sad. All right, brings us to our main event.
Oh wait, I do have to mention very quickly, because this is also how I ended the discussion on heavy hands this week. I really hope Jacare comes in with some goofy ass looking hair, because the current saga of his life is that he said he wants to retire with an afro because he's discovered some kind of hair loss treatment.
Yeah, he's going through some hair treatment and he's trying to grow it out in afro. So I would love it if he just comes in with like that, with like a pick in it.
Just go for it with the bald top. Look like a basketball, like a 40-year-old basketball player from the 70s. I would love that look. The afro ring.
Goggles with like the huge strap.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, go for the afro ring, even if you can't go all the way.
All right. Brings us to our main event. Amanda Nunes, Raquel Pennington.
This fight has to happen, and that's why it's happening.
Yep.
Otherwise, Amanda Nunes is going to win it. Raquel Pennington has some paths here. She has some ways to go. She has some advantages. What it really depends on, like to a lesser degree, this is like the Jacare fight is for Jacare, where it's like, okay, is Nunes going to screw up in this way? Is she going to look physically deficient in this way. If she just makes the right decisions, she has way too many advantages over Rocky Pennington to lose this fight.
Yeah.
If also like John Lineker, if that Shevchenko fight presaged a permanent change, if she's going to be like latter day Rose Namajunas now, where it's like, okay, we can stop worrying so much about her gassing out or going crazy for the finish and exhausting herself. But also like, was that just a one-time thing where she was trying on that style and she doesn't know where the middle ground lies between turning off your offense and going crazy? So there are X factors here, which is, always the fun thing to think about, but always the difficult thing to actually analyze materially, because I can't tell you whether or not Amanda Nunes is going to do this or going to do that. What I can say is that Raquel Pennington needs to use volume to her advantage if she's going to hope to tire Amanda Nunes out. She needs to work behind her jab and throw combinations. I think she especially needs to use her jab to draw out counters and then counter those with combinations, all while pushing forward as often as she can and hopefully getting to the clinch, where she's, not the most active or assertive fighter, but very sturdy. Like, it just seems like people who clinch with Raquel Pennington end up just like getting tired and not getting much done. And she's always just kind of chipping away. She's one of those fighters who doesn't push a pace all that often. She does, but it's really that her pace is super consistent.
Yeah, she's very tenacious, very consistent, and very tough.
She will stay in there and continue just pecking away at the exact same rate all fight long.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that's definitely a type of fight you could win against Amanda Nunes. The problem is like Nunes is way more athletically gifted than Pennington. She's so much more powerful. She's so much faster. She's so much lighter on her feet. And she has much better timing. Like all of these things we think of as athletic ability, Nunes has them in spades, and Rocky doesn't.
Much better technique.
Yeah. Pennington's boxing is like improving, but
there's still a lot of arm punches in there.
For sure. And then we add to that the fact that Pennington has been inactive. It's been like 2 years since she last fought, since she beat Miesha Tate. And that's probably not a good thing. Amanda Nunes has at least been active, even if not all of her fights have been like, that's the Amanda Nunes we wanted to see. She has been trying things and figuring things out and staying busy. Yeah. And so, Amanda Nunes is going to win.
Yeah. I was I was ready to think of this as a close fight or an interesting fight going in. And then I started watching tape.
Yeah. And
I was just like, it would be shocking if Raquel Pennington won this. Mostly it would be, it's the kind of shocking where it's like, mostly it's all on Amanda Nunes to win or lose.
Yes.
That's the thing. And that's why it's shocking. And that's why I'm willing to be like, I would give her like an 85% chance of winning.
Yeah.
Because it's entirely in her court whether she wins or loses this fight. It's just about how well she manages her cardio.
Yep. Pennington's going to do one thing, and Nunes has the built-in ability to adjust to one thing better than Pennington can.
And another big part of it is honestly like, if Pennington, I would be more interested in Pennington being able to just like bully and use volume and be tough. If she had more than a boxing game to offer Amanda Nunes, but she never really has.
She'll try to wrestle, but
yeah, she as a striker.
Sure.
As a striker, she's almost entirely just a boxer.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going against a rangier boxer with a better jab and more power than you, and neither of you are great counter fighters. So the chance of you really coming back and feinting, drawing out the strike and then coming back with a counter combination is pretty low.
Yeah, I don't trust Nunes quite as much as I trust Cyborg, but if I had to make a comparison, this is like Cyborg versus Evinger.
Yeah.
where it's like, yeah, I have a lot of respect for this challenger, and they're real grimy, and they can do all these things, but like, there's just a gulf between them.
Yeah, like I don't see enough consistent counterpunching in Pennington's game to make me feel like she can depend on counterpunching. At which point it's a battle of assertive lead strikers, people who push their opponents, who are there to throw first. I mean, Nunes almost always tries to throw first. She shows a loaded up counter to scare people off, but she's very much usually the person leading the dance. And if Pennington, like, I much more trust her to lead than Pennington.
Yep.
Out at range. And then, yeah, I mean, Pennington's tough and gritty and can, keep a pace. But we've also seen in her fights with Misha Tate and even Elizabeth Phillips, fights she won, like, she didn't dominate the clinch. She got held against the cage a lot. She got lost position a lot. She, it's not like Raquel Pennington's just going to lock Nunes up in the clinch and then she'll be able to, like, just grind on her and put hands on her and get takedowns and stuff like that. It's like, no, she'll probably get turned really quickly. And then maybe if Nunes doesn't separate, then she'll have a chance to do more work.
But again, it falls on Nunes' head.
Yeah.
Basically, if Amanda doesn't fuck up, this is her fight.
Yeah. And otherwise, Pennington, other than some kind of surprise submissions, she's been able to pull out and stamp on people at random points. She's not a great finisher. Like, she doesn't have any knockouts to her name. She has a TKO via knees versus Kim Couture that's long enough ago to have been against Kim Couture in her debut fight. Otherwise, she's never knocked anyone out. So it's basically, does Amanda Nunes self-destruct and give away a submission? Or does she just win?
And Kim Couture's Wikipedia link links to Randy Couture's Wikipedia page.
Oh, that's just
just it has to be known.
I don't. For Nunes, it would be a damning indictment of her championship status.
Yeah. The question is, can you winning a belt is so different from keeping a belt.
Yeah.
This is like the ultimate version of that question. It's like, this will really prove that you don't know how to keep a belt.
Yeah, it's Rampage Jackson against Forrest Griffin.
Sure. Yeah. Basically, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And is Amanda Nunes actually Rampage Jackson? Probably not.
Hope not.
That's the question we're asking.
I'm going to have a much harder time liking her as much as I do if she's Rampage Jackson. I'm going to have to reevaluate my whole position on Amanda Nunes. What kind of truck does she drive? How carefully does she drive it?
How into Asian chicks and techno is she?
Probably a lot, actually.
Probably
I don't know. A lot. I can see Amanda Nunes with like an Asian girl on her arm, if only, What's Amanda Nunes' girlfriend's name?
Oh.
Other fighter. Come on. I can't think of it.
Damn it. Oh, Nina Ansaroff.
If only Nina Ansaroff weren't in the picture. But she's technically Asian, right? She's from Russia or something. I don't know.
You know what? We're officially done with this conversation. You took it way, way too far.
Where's Nina Ansaroff from?
Macedonia.
Oh, not Asian. Not even remotely Asian.
She's from Florida. But
yeah, she's just of Macedonian descent.
Yeah, of Macedonian descent. Anyway.
Okay. Well,
all those questions aside, it's just really hard for me to see, like, even if Pennington can make this fight gritty, it's hard for me to see her doing enough in any round to win a round. It would have to be Nunes destructing. Like I say, it would have to be Nunes really blowing up and then Pennington being able to, like, take her down and beat her up and choke her out.
Yeah. It looks like Cyborg Evinger. I think the best Pennington could do would be Cyborg Home.
Yeah.
Where like she's in there, she's doing what she can. It's just not enough.
And people might mysteriously give her rounds for no reason at all.
Yeah. Well,
like
I don't think judges are
Holly.
quite as infatuated with Rocky Pennington as they, for some reason, are with Holly Holm. But they do love giving her rounds she doesn't deserve.
All right. Nunes opened at minus 530, and in the past day or so has cascaded down to minus 989. And Pennington opened at plus 350 in the past 24 hours or so, has rocketed up to plus 630.
There's never any actual reason for odds to be that long, but they may as well be.
Yeah, it's a little too long just because we don't actually know if Nunes still has self-destruction in her.
Right.
But the way I see it, it's sort of, she's against a worse defensive striker than Valentina Shevchenko and a less dynamic athlete than Kat Zingano. And
it's one of those super stratified divisions. Like imagine if Robert Whittaker was defending his title against
Ryan James.
Not even maybe that much, but like Talis Lightus. You would destroy him. It's not like Lightus isn't a good fighter. It's just like there's a massive gulf between most of the division and the very best.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. On that note, I mean, and that's the thing. Like I say, it's hard for me. I'm interested in this card. I like parts of it. There's a lot of questions I want to ask and have answered. There's no one thing, though, that I can point to and be like, this is why I'm watching it.
It sure as shit isn't UFC 225.
No. Buy a pay-per-view for John Lineker versus Brian Kelleher.
Right, exactly. Woo! I'm hyped.
All right. On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. You can find both of us over at Bloody Elbow. And where we're week in, week out, writing stuff, whatever we're doing. I'll be back for the 6th round after this pay-per-view. And I will be back for another Vivisection probably later this afternoon for Bellator, I believe. Until then, give us a like, thumbs up down there on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, MMANation.com, DOTCOM, to get all the rest of our shows, analysis, breakdowns, all that stuff we do week in, week out. And we will see you next week for UFC Fight Night, Maia versus Usman in Santiago, Chile, which, I'm not... There's not a lot going on with that card.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good fight for Usman.
Yeah.
The fact that the matchup with, what was the original matchup there?
Santiago Ponzinibbio.
Which sounds like a really enticing fight, but you could do worse than Maia if you demand a top 10 opponent and that one falls through.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean,
So,
that top fight's an interesting one, but it could be a really boring one.
Grasso Suarez, good fight, but mostly it's a similar kind of card where it's like, there's a couple highlights.
It's that's boring. Grasso Suarez could be fun, but it's also two really raw prospects as a co-main.
Yeah. But Enrique Barzola, Brandon Davis.
Yeah, I know.
Benitez Bondanai.
Barzola Davis fight, aren't we?
Benitez versus Bondanai. There's some bangers that no one will have thought about.
Yeah, there's some fights on there that nobody will give a shit about other than us. But as a card, even I'm a little like, the main card is actually just bad. Like,
yeah,
it could just be awful.
You don't want to see Veronica Macedo versus Andrea Lee and Diego Rivas versus Guido Canetti? You're not hyped about that?
Every time Diego Rivas' name comes up, I have to remind myself who he is and who he has fought. Every single time. All right.
So, big things on the horizon.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.